Springfield's Talk 1041. Welcome to the show, everyone. My name is Nick Reed. It's great to have you here. Coming up, we do have ourselves this Friday a Heroes Breakfast. If you're a veteran, you're going to come out to Scramblers. You're going to join us as we broadcast live 6A to 9A. And you are going to have breakfast purchased for you. Our good friends at Scramblers, responsible for that, along with Delta Roofing, Air Services, Heating, Cooling, Plumbing, Electrical, and Warrior's Journey, an incredible organization, all coming together and buying breakfast for you. If you're a veteran, that is this upcoming Friday. The effectiveness of Trump's McDonald's visit, which, of course, we talked about some yesterday, is indicated by the freak out of the media and the Democrats and the downplaying of it. It kills me that yesterday was filled with, well, the whole thing was fake. It was staged. There are even conspiracy theories that the people going through the drive-thru are actors. Now, this from a party that literally has multi-millionaire actors traveling all over the country campaigning for Kamala Harris. Down in Georgia, you've got Usher, Stevie Wonder, some other celebrities that are there. You have Jessica Alba campaigning, Louis Dreyfus, she's out there. I mean, all of these famous celebrities. Andy Cohen. There's a trio: Andy Cohen, Ben Stiller, and Doug Emhoff out there promoting, dads for Kamala or something along those lines. You have all of these just extreme wealthy celebrities that are running around the country telling the rest of us that we need to support their candidate for the presidency, that being Kamala Harris. And then when we watch on Sunday real people, some of which are immigrants to this country, expressing their appreciation to Donald Trump, their excitement to Donald Trump, those same people point the finger and say, well, those are just actors. Which, of course, is yet another conspiracy theory from the left. And it's a further demonstration that it works, that it was a success. You can always see if Trump does something that doesn't work, they either ignore it or they'll kind of genuinely poke fun at it. Not in a mean way. And this really doesn't happen that often because Trump's endeavors are generally pretty successful. But you can tell whenever they know something resonates with people because they get that anger going and the accusations, and then they start pointing fingers and coming up with conspiracy theories about things and trying to downplay or discredit it. And it's just, on a daily basis, a stark demonstration that this is not an election between Republican and Democrat. I mean, it is in terms of label. But outside of that, this is real people versus elite. This is Kamala Harris running around the country with Liz Cheney. You got the Obamas with, I don't even know how many mansions they have now, campaigning for her. You have all of the uber wealthy celebrities campaigning for her. And they're all mocking Donald Trump for meeting with average Americans while quote, working at a McDonald's. I thought it was real telling that Tim Walz on The View, and I think Ocasio-Cortez and some other left-wing elitists were accusing Trump of making fun of. This was demeaning and making fun of people who work those jobs. And the reason that's telling is because to average people, hardworking people, there is nothing demeaning about that job. I think it's interesting and very telling that the elites, to see that in their minds, that is making fun of someone who does that, because to them, that is a job of the lower class. And I'm not even talking economically, but in terms of the elite, that's for the peasants. That's how they see those jobs. So for one of what they consider to be the elites, which Trump isn't, but anyone who's running for office, that would, to them, that's like stooping down. So the only reason that you would really do that is of course it's got to be pandering. And so because you're pandering while portraying yourself in one of those jobs, you're mocking them. The only way that you really see it that way is if you believe that those jobs are beneath you. While average Americans don't see it that way at all. Average Americans see it as awesome, as really cool. Because average Americans don't see status the same way that the left does. This isn't the first time they've demonstrated that perspective of, well, there are the elite jobs that those of us who run the world have, and then there's the help. When they were attacking Trump for wanting to enforce our border, numerous occasions, Democrats would openly ask the question, who's going to clean our toilets? Who's going to take care of our kids? Who's going to take out our trash? I mean, they would say this on air, thinking that they were making a dig at Donald Trump. Well, what they were really doing is exposing their own perspective that there are the two classes in this world, in this country. There are the elites. It's a Hunger Games style situation. There are the elites with the cocktail parties, the intellectuals, and then there's the servant class. That's the rest of us. Trump is a person, like many of you, that doesn't view a person in different classes based off the job they have. He is somebody who just recognizes hard work. And that there is no job that is beneath anyone. Every job is an important job. Every job is a job that allows a person to demonstrate their character by how they do it, not what the job is, not how much money it gives a person or what sort of status it allows a person to have. So for Donald Trump deciding to go into, work at a McDonald's or anywhere else, middle management somewhere or upper, 6-figure, 7-figure somewhere, to him, it's work. And it's all noble, and it's all an opportunity to do a task at hand and to demonstrate your character as a person that you are. And I just think it's so, again, it's just really brings into focus the difference in how somebody like Donald Trump sees average Americans and average workers versus how the elites see it. Oh, well, clearly he's just mocking them. You would think that, wouldn't you? There's a piece in The Hill. It's so fantastic. It's an opinion piece. What if Joe Biden was the better candidate all along? Pyramid Roofing Company, talk and text line 447-KSGF. Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty, for all of your home buying needs, your home selling needs, whatever you need, even advice, questions you may have. She is your go-to key. She is so much more, way, way, way beyond what you may have had in the past with a realtor that lists your home, does an open house, brings some people through, and then if after the first week or so, it doesn't look like it's selling, their go-to answer is, well, let's just drop the price. And then they focus on other newer listings because they realize that yours may take a little bit more time than they want to spend on it. That's not what you get with Emily Johnson. You get an advocate that right out of the gate, based off of her expertise, prices your home in a way that she recognizes reflects what it is that increases the likelihood that somebody's going to purchase it in the market, in the town, in the region, in the neighborhood it's in at that particular time. Her number one goal is as quickly as possible to get you the most amount of money possible, fairly. And, of course, an advocate for you as well if you are looking to purchase a home, your first or your fifth. Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty. Weather in a moment. Right now, the latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Color 10 Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we have a very slight chance of rain in the morning and then mostly cloudy with a high near 85. Tonight clear with a low around 56. For your Wednesday, sunny skies with a high near 80. And on Thursday, sunny with a high near 82.
Harlan Ullman, opinion contributor to The Hill. What if Joe Biden was the better candidate all along? I love this. With the November 5th election just over a fortnight away, here's an intriguing thought experiment. By most accounts, the election's still a horse race too close to call, but although Vice President Kamala Harris quickly assumed the presidential mantle for Joe Biden and put in place an impressive startup, October has not been particularly kind to her. Donald Trump has closed the electoral gap, and some believe he's actually leading. No matter who wins, we have to ask, would President Biden have been a better candidate and choice despite suffering from the effects of age and 81 years? Further, suppose that the disastrous June 27th debate with Trump had not taken place, or that Biden had been firing on all cylinders that night. Would Biden have been forced to withdraw? And whether Harris loses or wins, some will ask whether Biden might still have been a better candidate. Bob Woodward's new book, War, might not be dispositive in representing Biden's strengths and weaknesses. The book does add weight to this thought experiment, though. Woodward paints a very positive picture of Biden's ability to lead and to govern, despite making mistakes, most notably the disastrous withdrawal from Kabul. Woodward also reports that Biden's obvious decline was physical, not mental. This was caused in part by prior medical conditions, accelerating the effects of age on the body. There were also the strains of high office. The president refused to limit his overworked schedule, despite valid criticisms that he was on a near-permanent holiday in Delaware or Camp David. Kamala Harris's role, as Woodward describes events, was not as significant as Biden's national security team, who were his band of brothers and sisters, and Woodward did not focus on domestic politics. Today's politics remain visual, whether on television or social media, with a constant flow of posts that millions of subscribers download every day. In fairness, Trump is an entertainer, showman, and salesman. He may be overweight and wear excessively long ties while obsessing about his finely coiffed hair, but he gets away with it. And Trump, like the Energizer Bunny, seems to have unlimited endurance. The physical comparison between the two presidents could not be more striking. That must favor Trump in a small way, accounts for some of his widespread public support. He's also interesting. Love him or hate him, Trump is far from boring. The size of his audience at rallies confirms that. Harris is a generation removed from both presidents. As Vladimir Putin slyly observes, she has a contagious laugh and a very buoyant and positive attitude that is refreshing and a counterpoint to Trump's bleak and dystopian view of the world. If Biden were still the candidate, he would have to overcome these physical and visual disparities with Trump. To do that, Biden would have to mount an aggressive campaign to portray Trump as a convicted felon unfit for public office. For some reason, the Harris campaign has downplayed this conviction and his 3 other pending cases, as well as Trump's major character flaws. The public may have decided, as senior Democrats have, that Biden is too old to serve. Had he been reelected, Biden would have been 86 at the end of his second term. Given his age, it's not impossible that Biden could suffer a major health event. Trump is only 3 years younger than Biden. He's certainly not immune to the vagaries of health, as his vice president nominee, Vance, understands. But Biden is not running, and with the death of Hamas leader Sinwar, Biden now has an opportunity to help conclude a peace agreement in the Middle East. That would be Biden's legacy. One hopes he will pursue that opportunity. As I previously written, Americans have not known the winner right away, given the likelihood of contested districts and recounts, or may not, rather. Yet, when the 47th president is decided, at some stage, people may wonder whether the best choice was not Harris or Trump. In retrospect, perhaps America would have been better served if the 46th president, Joe Biden, won a second term. Do you know how much simpler things would be for the Democrats if they just didn't overturn the election of Joe Biden and then let the donors install Kamala Harris? All of this second guessing they have to. There is, excuse me, a liberation of sorts, if you will, to being like, hey, the voters decided, so it's on them. You know, the voters picked Joe Biden, and if Joe Biden Now, of course, they misled. They lied to the voters. That included Kamala Harris claiming that he was as sharp as a tack. The media continued to carry the lie as well. They would even acknowledge, I think it was it Jake Tapper? It was either Jake Tapper or one of the other big ones that had noted, oh, yes, I've been told by insiders that for 2 years this has been a problem, talking about Joe Biden. So, in fairness, the media and the Democrats lied to Democrat voters in order to get them to pick Joe Biden. But aside from that, if they had just said, hey, you voted, this was your choice, and then it went downhill from there, they could say, hey, this is how it works. But now they've got the second guessing. Now there's the finger pointing because they are responsible for overturning the election in 50 states and then letting donors buy the nomination for Kamala Harris. And so this is what you get. Whenever she isn't doing well, and then, of course, if she does lose the campaign, lose the election, all of the finger pointing, all of the second guessing, should we have just let the election stand? Should we have just let democracy play out instead of disrupting it and overturning the election? If a person is objective, it is somewhat humorous to watch these people who arranged for all of this to occur, then to be surprised that it's not working out the way that they wanted it to or the way they convinced themselves it would. The very same people, and this includes those in the media, that leading up to that debate were calling for Kamala Harris to be dropped from the ticket. In my lifetime observing presidential elections, there have always been unpopular vice presidents. I've never heard, particularly from a president running for re-election's own party, calls that president drop his running mate. I've never heard that happen. That's how bad Democrats felt Kamala Harris was for the ticket. That they were openly calling, writing editorials, going on talk shows, arguing that Biden needed to drop her. Those same people are now just, they can't figure out how come she's not winning this thing. I mean, what is going on in the heads of these people? And now the op-eds begin. What if Joe Biden was actually the better candidate all along? I think some of this is reputational preservation. This is trying to rewrite the history of where people stood so that they're prepping for Trump to win. That way they can say, hey, I was, look, remember I wrote this op-ed piece saying that we should have kept Biden. This is all about covering reputational butts. Springfield's Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed. Heroes Breakfast Friday, Warrior's Journey, Delta Roofing, Air Services, Heating, Cooling, Plumbing, Electrical, and then Scramblers, of course, making it possible for free breakfast for veterans. That is coming up all this Friday, 6A to 9A. Coming up, Will Scharf, whom many of you may remember ran in the primary attorney general. He's a Trump attorney, has a piece in the Federalist. CBS News release the full Kamala interview transcripts now. Also, apparently she has scaled back her campaign trail presence. We're told to prepare for interviews. There's a lot about that isn't good for her as a reflection of the direction of her campaign. I'm Nick Reed.
Springfield's Talk 1041, your first alert forecast from Color 10 Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by Wolfpack Cleaners, your residential and commercial cleaning professionals. Today we have a very slight chance for rain in the morning and then mostly cloudy skies with a high near 85. Tonight clear with a low around 56. For your Wednesday, sunny skies with a high near 80, and on Thursday, sunny with a high near 82.
And don't forget, you can find Kansas Territory Brewing Company beers in the area Macadoodles and the Price Cutters now. For a while, the only place in the Springfield market you could get it was Hammond's Field. But the season ended, and so those of you who really enjoyed it as a go-to, it wasn't available. But now it is on the shelves in the area out of Washington, Kansas. Bradford Light, tailored for the hardworking men and women who appreciate a reliable, easy drinking experience. It's a good go-to beer, 3.8% ABV on it. And so, sometimes you just kind of like the standard. You think, oh, well, no matter what a person's taste is, if they like a beer, then they're probably going to love this. And so that's Bradford Light's offering for you. And that, again, is something that you can get in area Macadoodles and Price Cutters. So if you see it, think, oh, that looks new, then you'll know from where it came. Kamala Harris scaling back campaign trail presence as she prepares for interviews. Her campaign has reduced her time on the trail this week, opting to prepare for an interview with NBC and a CNN town hall. The schedule is unusual for the closing weeks of a presidential campaign. Candidates typically place greater importance on holding local events in swing states rather than sitting for interviews with friendly networks. Harris will sit for an interview on Tuesday with NBC's Haley Jackson, whose reporting appears biased against Trump, of course. Wednesday, Harris will attend a CNN town hall. Trump has often called CNN fake news. Jason Miller, senior advisor to Trump, posted on X, never seen this in the closing days of a presidential race with under 2 weeks to go. Let's see. So rattled. Ian Sams is so rattled he's taking Kamala Harris off the campaign trail for 2 full days next week to prep for a Haley Jackson interview and then an Anderson Cooper town hall. While Harris plotted her big media appearances, the Trump campaign focused on Pennsylvania over the weekend, of course, holding a rally in Latrobe, worked at McDonald's, and hosted a town hall in Lancaster, and attended a Pittsburgh Steelers game. Now, on one, there's no real good way to sell this. Now, the reality here is they're scaling back her appearances because reality is sinking in. And the more that she is out there, the less well she does. This isn't anything new. This is why it was so amusing to watch the Democrats do the old switcheroo and convince themselves and try to convince everyone else that, oh, this is just going to be the most amazing campaign ever, because she does not campaign well. The more that people get to know her, the less well that she does. And that's what's occurring here. I believe also they're increasingly having a difficult time getting people to show up for these events. There was that very still unexplained, odd event in Detroit in which there was this rally with Lizzo, all of this promotion. Harris spoke for 6.5 minutes. That was it. And then Lizzo said some stuff like, Kamala Harris is going to make America look like Detroit, which is not a great selling point. And then she didn't even perform. Which is the whole point in having these artists. This is how the Democrats are filling the seats. This is how they are getting people to show up at these events. They've got 2 ways in which they're doing it. They are having artists show up and give free concerts, and they are busing people. They're getting people on buses. Oftentimes, they have to go outside of the market that they're in at the time and bus them in order to fill the seats. I suspect what's occurring here is this is becoming increasingly more difficult to do. So you take the combination of Kamala Harris is not a good campaigner. The more she's out there, the worse she does. With the fact that they are having to, that she herself is not a draw. And so they are having to bus people in. They're having to trick people into coming in, making them believe they're going to see some sort of concert. We saw this even with the Democratic National Convention. The leak rumor that Beyonce was going to show up and perform. And, of course, the place all of a sudden was packed beyond full capacity, only to find out that not only was she not going to perform, but there never was any plan whatsoever. That leak was put out there on purpose. This from a party that is claiming, well, Donald Trump faked that McDonald's, the lobby wasn't open. Only the drive-thru was open for customers. The lobby wasn't open, so the whole thing was staged. These are people who leaked a false report that Beyonce was going to be at the DNC in order to trick people into being there. I mean, not to mention giving free hot dogs to women who would kill their own sons or daughters. Now, they don't obviously want that to be the narrative. So instead, what they're claiming here is the reason they're scaling back these events is because she's prepping for interviews. Well, does that really look that much better? This is a woman who wants to be president of the United States. In the final stretch of the campaign, what prep does she have to do to sit down with two separate individuals to do an interview, individuals that desperately want her to win this election? What preparation do you have to do? In real life scenarios, this is what should concern, among the many other reasons, concern people about Kamala Harris being president of the United States. She's demonstrating she's in over her head as a candidate. We're supposed to believe, and this could be a little bit of both here, that they do believe they've got to train her, they've got to prep her for two friendly interviews, and it's going to take so much time that they need to get her off the campaign trail, and the bonus to that is that she's off the campaign trail. How is it that, now, it's her campaign that is claiming the reason she's not there campaigning is that she has to prep for these two interviews, one with CNN and the other one with NBC. How on earth can we expect her to be prepared to be president of even if she was sharp and made all the right decisions, to be president of the United States if she can't do two interviews with networks that are trying to help her get elected without taking herself off the campaign trail to prep for it? If you're in over your head as a candidate, that is what many people would call a red flag in regards to her potential occupation of the White House. And maybe Americans should glean something from that. And maybe some of the undecideds, maybe even some of the Kamala Harris supporters go, you know what? If that's too much for her, maybe she should not have the weight of the presidency on her. Let's not forget, one of her big complaints when she was vice president was that she was given that she hadn't learned to say no to Biden. She was just given too much work to do. Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed. CBS 60 Minutes still in cover-up mode regarding the full transcript of that interview that was done with Kamala Harris, in which they've come under much criticism because of the release of one of the answers that was played on, I think it was Meet the, no, it wouldn't be Meet the Press. It's whatever, the CBS is Face the Nation, I think is their show, Face the Nation. And then there was a tremendous amount of backlash because Kamala Harris answered the question so poorly. It was another convoluted, just labyrinth of words. And then when CBS aired it during the during their full segment, they edited it down so she sounded less like an idiot. And they claim that it was just a coincidence when they edited it down that she sounded like less of an idiot, that's not why they did it. They just did it for time constraints. It was just worked out in her favor. I suppose anytime there's less of an answer from Kamala Harris, by default, she's going to sound like less of an idiot. But as you can imagine, many people saw this as the effort to manipulate her answers in order to help her. And, of course, this is a completely natural observation because it's very clear all of these people want Kamala Harris to be elected president. And there's a very simple solution to all of this, and that is just release the full interview. Will Scharf has a piece in The Federalist. CBS News was one of the defining news outlets in the world. Whether it was Edward R. Murrow reporting live from London during the Blitz in World War II or Walter Cronkite's coverage of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, generations of America turned to CBS for fair, accurate reporting on the most important issues of the day. No longer. CBS News now stands accused of deliberately distorting its news coverage for nakedly political purposes to prop up Kamala Harris's flailing presidential campaign by attempting to hide her inability to answer even simple questions about her own policy positions and how she would act if elected president. How badly skewed was CBS's coverage of its interview with Harris broadcast to the world on Face the Nation and 60 Minutes? Well, last week, the nonprofit group Center for American Rights filed a complaint with the Federal Communications Commission alleging deliberate news distortion, which is a violation of FCC regulations and a half-century of precedent. In this complaint, CAR, that is the Center of American Rights, lawyer David Shore contends the evidence of illegal news distortion by CBS could not be more clear. In two different news programs, CBS broadcast the same question, followed by two very different answers from Harris, resulting in a situation where, quote, the general public no longer has any confidence as to what Vice President Harris actually said in response to the query. This goes well beyond mere editorial oversight of an interview, picking what to include and what not to include, and instead constitutes a violation of the public trust that the news material CBS presented was in any way factual. Responding to the complaint in a Fox News interview, FCC Commissioner Nathan Semington indicated that he is taking the matter seriously. Quote, going to the news is an act of extending trust, he stated, and the thing about trust is that once it's lost, it's very difficult to regain. Compounding the problem is the fact that CBS has thus far refused to release a full, unedited transcript of its interview with Harris, as is typical with such interviews. In fact, on Sunday, the network released a statement standing by its edit, while taking several swings at former President Trump, while writing, former President Donald Trump is accusing 60 Minutes of deceitful editing of our October 7th interview with Vice President Kamala Harris. That is false. 60 Minutes gave an excerpt of our interview to Face the Nation that used a longer section of her answer than on 60 Minutes. Same question, same answer, but a different portion of the response. The portion of her answer on 60 Minutes was more succinct, which allows time for other subjects in a wide-ranging 21-minute-long segment. Remember, Mr. Trump pulled out of his interview with 60 Minutes and the vice president participated. As Trump's campaign said in a response to the statement, 60 Minutes just admitted to doing exactly what President Trump accused them of doing. They edited in a different response from another part of her answer to make Kamala Harris sound less excoriant than she really is, or less incoherent, rather, than she really is. Their statement is not a denial. It's an admission that they did exactly what they were accused of. CAR is demanding that the FCC compel the release of the transcript, but unless and until the FCC takes action, CBS cannot run away from the fact that it is deliberately distorting the public record at the very height of a presidential election. Unfortunately, CBS is no stranger to election rigging controversies. On September 8, 2004, at the height of the contentious presidential election, 60 Minutes anchor Dan Rather breathlessly covered the damning Killian memos, which purported to prove that President George W. Bush had shirked his responsibilities to the Texas Air National Guard decades earlier. The only problem was that the Killian memos were quickly proven by internet sleuths to be clumsy modern-day forgeries. Rather was quickly put out to pasture, staffers were fired, but clearly CBS did not learn its lessons. Its willingness to distort the truth for nakedly political purposes remains apparently unaltered 2 decades later. The American people should be able to trust the news they watch. That they watch is not deliberately distorted. The FCC has a responsibility to ensure that its licensees do not break the law. And CBS, if it wants to restore the trust that so many once had in its news broadcast, needs to come clean. What did Kamala Harris actually say? Again, Will Scharf, which you may recognize his name. He's an attorney for Trump, and he ran for attorney general in the primary here in Missouri. CBS knows. They know what they did. And the reason that we know that they know is because if they are correct, and if the way that they edited it is not done in a way, or was not done in a way, that the audience would have a different perception of the two different answers, they have the proof of that. They have the proof. And that is the unedited version of what she said. See, the purpose of, or it should be the purpose, of a media outlet is for the viewer, the recipient of your news, to have the most accurate understanding of what actually happened as possible. If they aren't perceiving it correctly, then you're not doing your job correctly. You think, well, I mean, it's not our fault that they're idiots. Well, but your job is to make them understand. It is to make us understand. So the proof is to put the full interview out there, and if the masses, if the recipient of your information says, oh yeah, no, both of those, they're one and the same, then you are correct. And it was not edited in a way that distorted reality. But they're not doing that, are they? They are the ones with the proof. And when you are correct and you have proof that you are correct, you put it out there. But when the evidence instead shows that what you're accused of is the accurate truth, then we find people hide that information. They hide that evidence, and that's what CBS is doing. Today in Missouri is day one of early voting. I think it's called in Missouri. They don't call it early voting. Call it
No
no excuse
excuse.
voting, which means that with absentee voting, which has been underway for some time now, you are allowed to vote early if you have some sort of reason, going to be out of the state, out of the country, going to be having surgery. But no excuse voting means that anyone. So today is day one. The polls are open in Missouri. mentioned that early voting polls in Missouri opening today. Some of our Texas listeners noting polls open in Texas. Early voting Texas started. This is our good friend Jim Webb. Valerie stood in line for 45 minutes in order to vote. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out because it's clear that Republicans are seeing great successes in their efforts, fully due to Donald Trump, to get the early voting done and underway. And the evaluation here is that what happens or what has happened in the past is that you get this surge election day, and then the Democrat areas in particular of the country start counting these ballots, and then it puts them ahead. Now, how much of that is cheating? How much of that is ballot stuffing? We don't know the answer to that. But recognizing whatever the reason behind it, Trump says, all right, we've got to, this is the game. We've got to play to win. And so there's been this huge effort to get out this vote. And there have been a tremendous amount of success thus far getting Republicans to get out and vote early. Now, how many, this is what is going to, in hindsight, I believe, be evaluated depending on the outcome of the election. How many of those people are people that are simply transferring their vote from election day to the earlier period? So in other words, because what really matters here is how many additional votes overall. So if 100%, though this isn't realistic, but let's just say, for example, 100% of the people who are voting early would have voted on election day. Well, you're not changing the number of votes. You're just changing when the vote happened. The reason it's always been beneficial for the Democrats is because of the ballot harvesting component. They're very, very aggressive in targeting people who otherwise would not vote. And that's when they get the early voting done. Now, there are some Democrats who vote early just because it's there as an opportunity, but that's not really, and I think this is the difference. This is where the Democrats have the advantage. Republicans are potentially, all of this early voting that's taking place is largely people who were actual voters that were going to vote, as opposed to early voting for Democrats that are people that, they may not even still be alive. They are individuals that otherwise would not vote. This is why Democrats push to get everyone registered to vote. And here's the trick behind it. Though you can't tell how people vote, it is public record to tell if people voted. So if you get everyone registered to vote, and then you look back at the history, and here's a list of people who have been registered to vote in the last two presidential elections but have never voted once, it's a pretty safe bet that if you get a hold of their ballot, you're going to be able to fill it out, and they're not going to know any difference because they're not going to show up to vote and then be told, wait, somebody already voted in your name. That's why it is that they push for motor voter, where you're automatically registered or you're at least asked. And this was something Missouri did. I believe it was under Governor Holden. I could be wrong on that. But where, when you go to get your driver's license, they ask you if you want to get registered to vote. But what Democrats would like is for everyone to automatically be registered. Like once you turn a voting age, it is something that automatically happens because then they have access to all of that. And depending on the security and, voter integrity laws of any given state, it can be very, very easy to take advantage of this. The time that I was working up in Wisconsin, it was not uncommon because you could have absentee ballots. This was before early voting was something that they were taking advantage of. You could have absentee ballots sent to an address that was not the address listed of the person whose vote it is. And there would be hundreds and hundreds of ballots sent to mailboxes that were assigned to empty vacant lots or vacant buildings. And then somebody would go grab all of those. I mean, this is something that has been going on in Wisconsin for election after election after election after election. Every state has the ability to set their own rules, what is and is not allowed. And states that are run by Democrats generally have rules that make it much, much, much easier to collect up those ballots. And so, and I'm not dismissing the significance and the importance of this early voting that is occurring by Republicans, but I think when we see early voting by Republicans, it's different than early voting by Democrats, because largely those early votes are votes that are simply shifting from election day to prior to election day, as opposed to Democrats, where so many of those early voting ballots are ballots of people who would not show up to vote on election day. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't an advantage to Republicans, because Republicans, what this allows them to do, and this is why they've really been pushing this so hard, is particularly in swing states. Now, Missouri, this isn't as relevant, but in swing states where they have to target people for getting out the vote as efficiently as possible. And if they're able to tell that you have already voted, they don't have to target you any longer. They don't have to come knock on your door. They don't have to call you or send you a text message or, whatever form of communication that oftentimes costs money and man hours to say, don't forget to get out to vote. So it allows them to target people more effectively that are called the low propensity voters, individuals that, they may vote, they may not vote, they don't feel real compelled to, but if they do vote, they're going to vote for Trump. And those are the people they really would like to get out to vote early, because if you get those votes in, then those are people that may not have shown up to vote on election day. So I think that when we look at the early vote totals, there is a bit of an apples and oranges because of the way that each party is approaching the early vote. And Republicans, they just don't go out, look at the voter rolls, who hasn't voted in the last several years. Let's request ballots in their names. Let's fill them out. Let's go to nursing homes and pass out ballots, or, encourage. And this is something else that happens in Wisconsin. Again, I reference Wisconsin because the time that I worked up there and became very familiar with how much of this worked. They would request the absentee ballots for people in nursing homes, people that weren't even aware of what was going on. I mean, they had no cognitive abilities whatsoever. They were out of it. And then Democrats would send volunteers to go, quote, help them fill out the ballots. These are just the things that are done on the Democrat side. Republicans don't do that. And so it is a bit of an apples and oranges. Now, that being said, I don't want to dismiss the advantages and the upside to Republicans getting out to vote, because another aspect of this, the vote early, is it shows enthusiasm. And I just really genuinely do not believe the level of enthusiasm that is here for Trump this time was there back in 2020. It may have been for you, but overall, because of COVID, because of just all of the noise that was being made and the promises of, oh, don't worry, the adults will be back in the room, everything will be quiet and hunky-dory, and all of the scandals will go away. That was something that for a lot of people, the idea of taking a nap from the chaos was very appealing. That selling point is not there anymore for the Democrats. And we have, for the first time in our lifetimes, the opportunity to have two people running in which we've seen the results of both people. Harris in the Biden administration and Trump from his administration. And that is a very unique position, one that I would argue, and I think the anecdotal evidence as well as even polling indicates, benefits Donald Trump to a great degree. Latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Color 10 Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we have a slight chance for rain in the morning and then mostly cloudy skies with a high near 85. Tonight clear with a low around 56. For your Wednesday, sunny skies with a high near 80. And on Thursday, sunny with a high near 82.
Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line regarding I was referencing the time that I worked in Wisconsin. It was common practice for Democrats to go to nursing homes and request absentee ballots for patients there, oftentimes who had no idea even where they were. And then once they came in, filling them out for them to stuff the ballot box. Message coming in saying it happened at the neighborhood of Quail Creek, too, when I was a nurse there. During the last election, I saw a lot of that. So it is something that Democrats take advantage of. You know, they just want to make sure those people's voices are heard. That's all. I believe it was Sunday. Kamala Harris sat down with Al Sharpton on MSNBC. And Al Sharpton is probably one of the most high-profile, well-recognized anti-Semites in this country. And this needs to not be forgotten. It needs to not be forgotten for a number of reasons, but in particular because of the very clear and brazen anti-Semitism in the Democrat Party today. And I think a lot of people who have traditionally voted Democrat need to make a real decision here. Now, this doesn't mean you have to support Donald Trump. But are you really anti-Semitic? Or are you going to say, well, I'm not, but I'm just going to continue to support people who breed anti-Semitism? You know, history is filled with movements of evil that were allowed to flourish because people said, well, I'm not like that, but who am I to get in the way of the people who are? all of this college campus anti-Semitism, all of the fact that Kamala Harris deliberately did not pick the governor of Pennsylvania, Shapiro, to be her running mate because he's a Jew. Is this really who you are? I wanted to read two pieces just as right. The fact that she would sit down with Al Sharpton, an openly, unapologetically anti-Semite, sit down with him for an interview. So I grabbed a story, and this was actually from some time ago. This is when Harris was a senator. Senator Kamala Harris defended the Reverend Al Sharpton as someone who has, quote, spent his life fighting for what's right after President Trump called the MSNBC host a con man, claiming that he hates whites and cops. If Kamala Harris believes inciting violence, leading race riots, rallying anti-Jewish protest, and corporate shakedown schemes counts as working to improve our nation, then Sharpton has gone above and beyond. Since the by the way, this is somebody that MSNBC has on their payroll. Since the 1980s, Sharpton has engineered protests, boycotts, and riots, often pitting African Americans against Jewish communities. Perhaps the most gruesome being a 4-day race riot in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, after a Hasidic driver killed the child of Guyanese immigrants in a tragic car accident. Sharpton stirred up anti-Semitic protests shouting, "No justice, no peace." They would then target innocent Jewish homes, breaking windows, setting cars on fire, and an angry mob murdered Jewish bystander Yankel Rosenbaum. Sharpton is the one who led the mobs, who chanted about killing, quote, blood-sucking Jews and, quote, Jew bastards. According to reporter Philip Gorovich, Sharpton used his speech at the child's funeral to further stoke anger. Sharpton at the funeral said, quote, talk about how Oppenheimer in South Africa sends diamonds straight to Tel Aviv and deals with the diamond merchants right here in Crown Heights. The issue is not anti-Semitic. The issue is apartheid. All we want to say is what Jesus said. If you offend one of these little ones, you got to pay for it. No compromise, no meetings, no coffee clutch, no skinning and grinning, end quote. 4 years later, Sharpton was riling up protesters again, this time against Fred Harari, a Jewish subtenant who operated Freddy's Fashion Mart in Harlem, and evicted his own subtenant, who happened to be a black-owned record store. Sharpton told the protesters, quote, we will not stand by and allow them to move this brother so that some white interloper can expand his business. At a separate rally, Sharpton's colleague at the National Action Network, Morris Powell, said, quote, we're not going to stand by idly and let a Jewish person come into black Harlem and methodically drive black people out of business up and down 125th Street. The Sharpton-led protests came to a head in December when Roland James Smith Jr., who had participated in Sharpton's protest, walked into Freddy's Fashion Mart, pulled out a gun, ordered all the black customers to leave, poured paint thinner on several bins of clothes, and set them on fire. 7 people died. Sharpton claimed that he wasn't involved in the protest and was only there to mediate. Incidentally, the reason Harari, the Jewish man, had raised the rent of his black tenant in the first place was because his rent had been raised by his landlord, a black Pentecostal church. Sharpton has not once apologized nor shown any remorse for the consequence of the riots or the deaths caused in his wake. He even criticized the NYPD for linking the protesters to the fire. Despite a track record of anti-Semitism, the media has allowed the whitewashing of Sharpton's career, eased by his relationship with Obama, who Sharpton endorsed in 2007. Courting Sharpton has since been a tactic used by presidential candidates to win over black voters. Mayor Pete Buttigieg, Senator Bernie Sanders, and Harris have all paid visits to have lunch with Sharpton in Harlem. Now, of course, this doesn't even cover the Tawana Brawley case, in which he helped orchestrate false accusations against a police officer of rape. I have another piece that I want to share with you. It's more brief, but we do have to take a break. This is how, though, we need to recognize and understand how accepting and comfortable the Democrat Party and the media is with anti-Semitism. These same media outlets will accuse Donald Trump of being anti-Semitic because he went to a lunch in which a Proud Boy happened to be, in which Trump didn't even know he was going to be there. Meanwhile, they run to kiss the ring of Al Sharpton, who led riots against what he called Jew bastards and blood-sucking Jews, resulting in one instance of the murder of an innocent Jewish man and in another, 7 being burned alive. This is the Democrat Party. And I think some of you are like, well, I don't know. Can't really decide between Kamala Harris and Trump. This doesn't nudge you any? Springfield's Talk 1041. I'm Nick Reed. For the traffic update, reminder that at KSGF.com, full list of fall festivals in the Ozarks. That's sponsored by Dogwood Canyon, and maybe whether it's an area festival or you're going to head down to Dogwood Canyon. Now, it's not that far away, obviously, but even a 45-minute trip, if 30 minutes into it you break down on the side of the road, that can derail the entire day, the entire weekend. And while sometimes unforeseen circumstances are just that, and they are unavoidable, oftentimes routine maintenance can prevent those breakdowns from happening. So next time you have in, maybe it's just for an oil change, just say, hey, what else do I need to check on? And they'll walk through that with you, and then you can be best prepared to help prevent yourself from, hopefully, those unforeseen circumstances where you're stuck on the side of the road, and even though it's just a 45-minute drive away, it ruins your entire week. And A1 Custom Car Care, all of your car care needs.
Springfield's Talk 1041, your first alert forecast from Color 10, Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by Wolfpack Cleaners, your residential and commercial cleaning professionals. Today we have a slight chance for rain in the morning and then mostly cloudy skies with a high near 85. Tonight clear with a low around 56. For your Wednesday, sunny skies with a high near 80, and on Thursday, sunny with a high near 82.
Al Sharpton is probably the most well-known, high-profile individual that is as anti-Semitic openly as he is. Now, I'm not saying there aren't other people that match him. Louis Farrakhan does as well. Some could argue even more so. But I would argue more people know Al Sharpton, particularly given that MSNBC has him as a paid voice of providing news and opinion on their network, feeling that his level of anti-Semitism is something that their network needs to make sure is spread amongst their viewership. And I was reading a piece, and Kamala Harris sat down to do an interview with him that aired Sunday. There was a piece in the Federalist that was in response to Kamala Harris coming to his defense when Donald Trump called Al Sharpton a con man. And Harris went on to talk about what a great asset Al Sharpton is to the community. And this is somebody that has not only expressed extreme anti-Semitic views, but has led riots against Jews that have resulted directly in the deaths of numerous people, including Jews. It was so bad, in fact, and this piece is just fantastic. This is the text of a resolution, rather, that was introduced March 8th, 2000. And it was sponsored by then Congressman Joe Scarborough, who now sits alongside Al Sharpton on MSNBC, legitimizing his anti-Semitism. This is what Joe Scarborough's sponsored resolution said at the time. Whereas the Congress strongly rejects the racist and incendiary actions of the Reverend Al Sharpton. Whereas the Reverend Al Sharpton has referred to members of the Jewish faith as blood-sucking Jews and Jew bastards. Whereas the Reverend Al Sharpton has referred to members of the Jewish faith as white interlopers and diamond merchants. Whereas the Reverend Al Sharpton was found guilty of defamation by a jury in a New York court arising from the false accusations that former Assistant District Attorney Stephen Pagones, who is white, raped and assaulted a 15-year-old black girl. Whereas to this day, the Reverend Al Sharpton has refused to accept responsibility and expresses no regret for defaming Mr. Pagones. Whereas the Reverend Al Sharpton's vicious verbal, anti-Semitic attacks directed at members of the Jewish faith, and in particular a Jewish landlord arising from a simple landlord-tenant dispute with a black tenant, incited widespread violence, riots, and the murder of 5 innocent people. Whereas the Reverend Al Sharpton's fierce demagoguery incited violence, riots, and the murder in the Crown Heights section of Brooklyn, New York, following the accidental death of a black pedestrian child hit by the motorcade of an Orthodox rabbi, Menachem Schneerson. Whereas the Reverend Al Sharpton led a protest in the Crown Heights neighborhood and marched next to a protester with a sign that read, "The white man is the devil." Whereas the Reverend Al Sharpton has insulted members of the Jewish faith by challenging Jews to violence and stating to Jews to pin down their yarmulkes. And whereas the Reverend Al Sharpton has practiced the politics of racial division and made inflammatory remarks against whites by characterizing the death of Amadou Diallo as a racially motivated police assassination, now therefore be it resolved by the House of Representatives, the Senate concurring, that the Congress, number 1, condemns the practices of Reverend Al Sharpton, which seeks to divide Americans on the basis of race, ethnicity, and religion. 2, expresses its outrage over the violence that has resulted due to the Reverend Al Sharpton's incendiary words and actions. And 3, fervently urges elected officials and public servants who have condoned and legitimized the Reverend Al Sharpton's incendiary words and actions to publicly denounce and condemn such racist and anti Semitic views. That, again, is the text of a resolution introduced in Congress in the year 2000 by then Congressman Joe Scarborough, who now sits gladly next to Al Sharpton, his colleague on MSNBC, helping legitimize his anti Semitism. The more that we allow anti-Semitism in the media and the Democrat Party to become normalized, the more dangerous it becomes. There's an irony there, because the more that people become less impacted and affected by it, the less stark it seems, the more dangerous it actually is. You know, the anti-Semitism on the university campuses, it is still occurring. It's just for a number of reasons it's not being covered any longer. In the beginning, it became an impossible thing not to cover. It was right after October 7th, and you had a lot of the universities just having to completely shut down, SWAT teams having to go in, riot control because of the Democrat activists that were threatening Jews, calling for genocide, calling for finishing what Hitler started. But as things got much closer in election season, and with the last several weeks in particular, Kamala Harris being bought the nomination by the donors, and the fact that she skipped over Shapiro as her running mate because he's a Jew, they don't really want the American people to recognize the dangerous level of anti-Semitism in the Democrat Party and in the media itself. Again, these are people who put Al Sharpton as a voice of reason on their network, MSNBC. And I bring it up, one, because Kamala Harris sat down for an interview with Al Sharpton, but also we cannot let the Democrats normalize anti-Semitism. We cannot allow the Democrats to make the vicious hatred and danger towards the Jews so commonplace that we don't even pay attention to it any longer and we don't call it out any longer. Because that's what they want, is for the rest of us to say nothing. The rest of us to become so accustomed to it that we no longer worry about it and draw attention to it. And we cannot let that happen. Springfield's Talk 1041, I'm Nick Reed. Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line. Did you see the Al Smith dinner? Jim Gaffigan roasting both candidates. Classic. Yes, I did. I watched it. I watched the vast majority of his speech, I guess, or bit, if you would. The latter part of it, I ended up not being able to watch because I had something come up. I watched Trump's entire speech. One of the things that was real noteworthy about it, and so Gaffigan gets up there, and one of the things that Gaffigan had noted, and I think we played the audio here, is he talked about how Democrats are always claiming that Trump is a danger to democracy, and in fact, they believe it so much that they, overthrew the results of the election of Joe Biden and implemented Kamala Harris. Of course, making the point here, and that Democrats claim that they're all about defending democracy, yet, until it doesn't work out for them, and then they throw it out the window. But he made some real jabs at Donald Trump. I mean, one of them with Melania sitting there, he talked about how Donald Trump was claiming that cats were being eaten by immigrants and so forth, and he made reference to the fact that this is the second election Trump has been involved in which kitties were a subject matter, referencing what. And so, I mean, there was some real hard-hitting stuff of Trump as well. Now, Gaffigan hates Trump and has demonstrated through tweets in the past that he has a great disgust for people who support Trump as well. I happen to think that his act that he did was very even-handed. And Chuck Schumer was sitting there, and Trump gave Chuck Schumer a hard time, and Chuck Schumer was standing like right there next to him, and Schumer laughed along with a lot of it and so forth. And what I was thinking to myself is, as all of this is playing out, how the left claims that Donald Trump is a dictator and just like Hitler. And it becomes very clear that they don't actually believe that. The insanity, it's like, do you know what a dictator is? Do you know what happens to people who openly mock and insult dictators? Do you have any concept whatsoever? Do you know what happens in North Korea if somebody questions or mocks Kim Jong-un? Do you know what would happen under Saddam Hussein to people who insulted Saddam Hussein? Do you have any idea what happens? And when you have the Chuck Schumers and any of these Democrats, mind you, who openly call out Donald Trump, talk about how dangerous he is, and then claim that he's a dictator, they clearly know that that's not true. Because if it were, they would not be around to say those things. Which makes their accusations all the more horrible and frankly demonstrates that they are very bad people. And here's why. Because there are people who do believe it, because they say it. This is why their supporters, their followers, have tried to kill Donald Trump. It would be one thing if they really, truly, genuinely believed it, but they demonstrate through their own actions that they don't. They do not fear him. Now, they may say, oh, I'm really afraid. Oh, he's going to jail us. Yet there's no one in the world that they hurl more insults at. There's no one in the world that they hurl false accusations at to the degree that they do him. The relationship between people who hate Trump and claim that he's a dictator and Donald Trump is the opposite of the relationship that people have with dictators. No one who claims Donald Trump is a dictator or will be a dictator or has been a dictator would act the way they do about Donald Trump if they really, truly believed he was a dictator or Hitler. The fact that they will, knowing he's not, use that rhetoric in which there are delusional people who do believe it. And knowing, because of what we've already seen, that their supporters will act on that and attempt to save us all by assassinating him, tells us what we need to know about them. They know what they're doing. And there's no getting around it. When you look at how they behave around Trump, showing that they know he's not a dictator, they know that their lives aren't in danger. It's, in fact, stupid to even have to point that out. I mean, it's like somebody who is constantly abusive to his spouse and then claims they do it because I'm so afraid of her. Oh, you have no idea. She's crazy. She's insane. My life's in danger around her. I'm afraid of her. I fear every day my life for her. Well, you sure don't act like it because you're the one knocking her around. They know that their rhetoric is not true. They know that their followers believe it, and they know that some of their followers have acted on it, and that's why they continue to do it. There is no getting around it. They know that they are increasing the likelihood that they are going to get him killed, and that's what they want. That's also why they downplay and ignore when it actually happens and act like it's not that big of a deal. Because that also helps set an environment in which people feel as if it clearly isn't that wrong. Nobody's even really that upset about it, at least the people they listen to. You look at the reaction, the way that the media, it just hit his ear, acting as if, floating the idea that he faked it, that there wasn't even really a bullet. All of that is done to minimize the killing of Donald Trump, to make it seem like the bad parts of trying to kill Trump aren't really that bad, but man, you may save democracy. Lots of upside, very little downside. Springfield's Talk 1041, I'm Nick Reed. This past Friday, talked with Alex Carricker, and they're so much more than just folks that arrange your home loans, your refinancing. In fact, when he joined us Friday, he's like, you know what, I actually don't even want to talk about that. He wanted to talk about credit consolidation, because obviously when you're dealing with people who are looking to refinance or get a home loan, then you're dealing with people who, you're talking about credit. And so they run into a lot of people, and who have utilize those credit consolidation outfits you see, and the people like, oh, I saved this much. I had 8 credit cards with this, and it was all in one, and it saved me this much. But what I didn't realize, and what he explained, is that in order for that to occur, you have to be at least 3 months behind on your payments. And a lot of times they don't tell you that. And so you may not be behind at all. You may have the great credit, but you're realizing I'm not going to be able to keep this up much longer. Oh, I can consolidate. And they say, oh, yep, here's where your new payments will start. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to save this much. And you don't realize, but all of a sudden your credit's gone to crap because they let 3 months go by. And so all of a sudden your credit is in the tank. Now, this is something they see, and I bring this up, one, because I think it's interesting and important to understand, particularly if you are doing it because you're going to want to apply for a loan, not realizing that you're tanking your chances of doing so for the time being. But that is what you get with the characters in their team. They're not just about, all right, give us your bank account information, give us your debt information, give us your social security number so we can look up your credit score. Here's what can offer you. They are a resource so far beyond that. That's what you get. So for all of your home loans, your refinances, or just any advice, iwantagreathomeloan.com, because you do. So as you know, Mark Cuban, who is a billionaire guy, he is a supporter of Kamala Harris. And he's out there campaigning for, and a number of the reasons they are out of touch and ludicrous. Now, I happen to think that there's this sort of rivalry and a jealousy of Donald Trump, and so he's rationalizing ways to support Kamala Harris. He was on CNBC recently and was asked about the unrealized gains taxes, and just, this is something that will destroy small businesses. How do you support her? And his stance is, oh, she won't really do that after all. She won't really do that. But one of the things that he said during an interview on Squawk Box is he was talking about how, by the way, if Trump wins and he wants my help, I'll be more than happy to help out. And he noted that, even though they are political opposition and Cuban has targeted him to a significant degree, he notes that during COVID, Trump reached out to him and asked him for help on, it had something to do with the helping foster the alterations to a company so that masks could be developed. Or, there were a lot of those changes going on with businesses where they changed the way they did business so that they could manufacture products that could help in the fight against COVID. And he talked about, hey, Trump tapped me and someone else. He goes, and you know what? If Trump gets elected president and he asks for my help again on something, then I will be more than happy to do that. He goes, don't get me wrong, I want Kamala to be president, but I would help out Trump. And I can guarantee you, Mark Cuban said that, one, because I believe he's genuine in it, but two, because he knows that if Donald Trump felt that he could be an asset to his agenda in helping the country, he would have absolutely no problem whatsoever bringing Mark Cuban into the fold. And we know this because of Trump's history anyhow. I mean, there have been numerous people that have proven to be, that have just targeted. But when he saw that they had a place in helping move the agenda forward to help average Americans, he brought them into the fold. Bygones be bygones, water under the bridge. Can you imagine Kamala Harris inviting Elon Musk into her administration? I think that this is an opportunity for us to recognize such a massive difference once again between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. If Kamala Harris gets elected president, not only would she not ask Elon Musk to come on board in a way that might be helpful to the country, whomever is head of the Justice Department under her, I'm sure will target him. They will go after him for anything and everything they can, whether it is in the context of his ownership of X or his ownership of Tesla or his internet connection, Skylink, whatever it is. They will spend their time and resources trying to punish him. That is the difference And I think it's pretty interesting. Mark Cuban instinctively recognizes that Trump would have no problem bringing him into the fold if he felt it was good for the country. That is a remarkable difference between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. You may have noticed that we do not hear, there's two words together that the media has not used in news stories for some time, and that is without evidence. When Trump was president running for re-election, everything he said they would say without evidence. He could be standing in the rain, and he would note that it's raining, and they would say, well, Trump claimed it was raining without evidence because he didn't bring graphs and charts and have a listing of meteorologists that said, it didn't matter that it was clear and obvious, but they would, without evidence. Everything was said without evidence. It's just amazing that Kamala Harris, we never hear that with Kamala Harris, especially when it comes to working at McDonald's. I finally saw an article in which without evidence was used regarding the claims that Kamala Harris worked at McDonald's.
Oh, who was it?
Okay, so I was looking through my stack. I couldn't find it. But here's the thing. The without evidence was used against Trump claiming that there wasn't evidence. I kid you not. I kid you not.
Of course.
It was Donald Trump claimed that there was without evidence that Kamala never worked at McDonald's. This is how insane the left has become. Here you have someone who's never talked really, McDonald's, this is just something that's been new. She's, bring it up. There's no pictures of her working at McDonald's, no evidence whatsoever. And the minute that someone's like, hey, can we get some proof here? They're the ones who's accused of asking questions or making suggestions that there is what is so, it's to even have to evaluate this stuff. To say Donald Trump, without evidence, is claiming that Kamala Harris doesn't have evidence she worked at McDonald's. The fact that she doesn't have evidence is the evidence. That is the evidence. McDonald's, incidentally, has said they have no record of her ever working for them.
Said it.
Oh, it was the Washington Post that said that? What a shock. I would think that there would be some level of self-evaluation in which I recognize, because clearly their goal is to convince people to vote for Kamala Harris. It's to alter the outcome of the election. You would think that there would be enough insight that if you have no credibility, you're not going to be able to do that. The fact that these people seem to be indifferent to the fact that they have destroyed all of their credibility, it defies what their goal and their aim is, and that is to alter the outcome of the election by misleading people. Well, if you have crafted an environment in which you become a joke, you are laughable. Donald Trump claims without evidence that there is no evidence Kamala Harris worked at McDonald's. That is the evidence, that there is no evidence. I'm going to play some audio coming up. Now the left, there are all these conspiracy theories that these were actors, these aren't real people, which that makes sense. That's called projection. We know that oftentimes listed on, whether it's been Craigslist in the past or there have been recruitment of paid actors in order to participate in certain Kamala Harris events and ad campaigns. This isn't a secret. So you can understand why that's their go-to, because that's what they do. Martha McCallum on Fox News interviewed the woman who was from Brazil and about what the experience was like and what it was that she meant when she asked Donald Trump, please do not let America turn into my native Brazil. So I want to play some of that audio for you. And it again is the juxtapositioning between real Americans, many of which are immigrants to this country, legal immigrants to this country, talking about their fears and concerns for the country, the hopes that they have that things can be turned in the right direction, and then Democrats dismissing them as they're not real, they're irrelevant, they're just actors. That is, you've got to understand, this is the difference between the elites and the rest of us. The elites dismiss our concerns. They do not care about our concerns. They are irrelevant to them. And that's why it is that McDonald's display of Donald Trump meeting with average people who are expressing their thoughts and their concerns to him is completely irrelevant to the elites. Those people mean nothing. Those concerns mean nothing. This is why it is that we have been subject, this entire administration, to dismissing our concerns about inflation. Oh, stop it. You don't know how good you have it. Biden and Harris out there, oh, we've got it better than other countries. Oh, we've got the best economy ever. It's because your pain, your situation is of no relevance to them. They demonstrate that by their actions and the dismissive nature of people who express those concerns. It doesn't affect them, so they don't care. Before we get to the news, Nathan Wade. Nathan Wade was the lover of Fani Willis, and he disappeared off the map for a while. There was an attempt to bring him before Congress to answer certain questions. He eventually showed up, and some of that information has leaked out. And what we're finding is that he is acknowledging that the whole thing was a setup. Nathan Wade admitted to Congress that his lover, Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis, was planning to prosecute Donald Trump before she ever even took the job, which means before there was any evidence collected, before she had the ability to talk with people, to interview, to see if there was any evidence that there should be a prosecution. He admitted, now she was going to create this from the beginning. Before she was even elected to office, this was her goal. Republicans subpoenaed Wade to get to the bottom of his involvement in the politicized prosecution of the ex-president led by Willis. The pair have been engulfed in scandal because of the affair and so forth, according to transcripts of his closed-door deposition before the House Judiciary Committee last week, reviewed first by Daily Mail. Wade said that he was on a search committee to find prosecutors who were willing to simply go after Trump. And he stunningly admitted that the committee was set up well before Willis ever even took the DA office on January 1st of 2021. She eventually would secure an indictment for Trump and 18 of his GOP allies in August 2023 that the former president had blasted as a hoax and a scam. Wade also said that he met personally with several officials in the Biden-Harris White House on at least 2 occasions. He would not elaborate on the meeting, skirting direct questions about the nature of the visits with official White House staff, including individuals in the White House counsel's office. According to a transcript of his closed-door deposition before the House Judiciary Committee last week, Wade said that he was on the search committee to find the prosecutors. He also confirmed he had meetings with the January 6th Congressional Committee, but would not provide details as to that as well. So this is much of what we have known, suspected, and what has been denied by the White House, that there was no collaboration whatsoever, that all of this was just about facts and evidence. But when it comes down to it, Nathan Wade, during subpoenaed testimony, is admitting that it was all a setup from the beginning, and it involved his visits to the White House with White House counsel and the January 6th committee. This is what we call a show trial. Latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Color 10 Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we have a very slight chance for rain in the morning and then mostly cloudy skies with a high near 85. Tonight clear with a low around 56. For your Wednesday, sunny skies with a high near 80. And on Thursday, sunny with a high near 82. And real quick, I want to tell you about my friends over at the Pyramid Roofing Company. It has been a long time since we have seen some rain in the Ozarks, and some of you are experiencing some this morning. Lucky you. But while some of you are happy to have that rain, others are probably experiencing some issues with their gutters or your roof. Now, if that sounds like you, I want to recommend Josh and his team over at the Pyramid Roofing Company. Don't put off repairs. That can actually lead to more serious issues later down the road. Now, whenever you call the Pyramid team, they'll come out, they'll do a free roof inspection for you. They won't try to upsell you or use scare tactics on you. They'll just tell you how it is, and then they will work through that insurance process with you. It's as simple as that. So whether you need a simple roof repair, a new roof, or maybe even commercial roofing, give the Pyramid Roofing Company a call today. You can find all of that contact information under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
So you can always tell when Donald Trump connects with the people because the elites go crazy. And the McDonald's event with Trump is the gift that keeps on giving. One, it was just fun to see, fun to watch, for a number of reasons. Much of just the reaction from the people going through the drive-thru, and we're going to play audio of the gal from Brazil coming up. And the way that this was set up, because she was asked about, like, how did all this come to be? And so she was, told, oh, it's a campaign event, but didn't know exactly what was going on. And she did not realize, because I guess they told him, oh, go through and get some food. And she said that she knew something was up when she saw the vehicle in front of her at the window, and by their physical movement, she could see that they were very excited. And so she said at that point, she suspected something was going on, but, she didn't know what it was. And it was still like just a shocking surprise to see Donald Trump standing there. So that part of it was just the genuine joy and the ability, particularly, I keep going back to the two legal immigrants to this country, or the couple that were legal immigrants in the last few years, I think, from India, and then this woman who 26 years ago came from Brazil. The ability to meet the president and it's just something about that that's really special, and to see that play out. Also, it was just funny. And it's one of the things that is so great about Trump supporters and Republicans is they have such a good sense of humor. No one can laugh more with, and sometimes even at, Donald Trump than Trump supporters can. And when I was growing up, it was the left and the Democrats that were portrayed or viewed as the people with a sense of humor, and they were hip and cool, and Republicans were these stodgy, old, crabby people with no sense of humor. And that is flipped. I don't know that I would have ever believed I'd see that day. Where even like Trump supporters, when he dances, they just kind of, they laugh. But I played that Howard Stern audio the other day where he was talking about how he can't even stand to see SNL making fun of Kamala Harris. They're sad, angry people, sapped of any ability just to really enjoy life. And you can see that in the lack of sense of humor. But the other part of the McDonald's gift that keeps giving is the way that the left has reacted to it. And it's been almost as joyful to watch them. I mean, the overriding narrative is that, well, he wasn't actually working there. Oh, really? Thanks. Because I thought that was his part-time job.
Yeah, I thought I could go over there tomorrow.
I thought that in addition to, running for president and, his empire that he has, that he had gone in one day to McDonald's and he asked for an application and he filled out the application and then he got a call back and he sat down for an interview and then he went through the training and then he got shifts because that's what we all thought. I mean, the stupidity of these people and the lack of any ability just to take a moment and enjoy it and see it for what it is. I mean, can you imagine if they're like, okay, hey, Joe Biden's working at an ice cream store, some sort of event, and Joe Biden loves ice cream, and so they have him behind the counter scooping ice cream. It would never even cross the minds of Trump supporters to be like, well, he's not actually working there, he's not a hired employee. I mean, because it's so stupid. But that is where the mind of the left goes. Do you not understand the point here? I mean, do you really think that was the point? And I think that they do. This is, again, the inability of the left to understand average, normal, hardworking people. And I think that they genuinely, some of them thought that this was Trump trying to convince people that he was an actual employee of McDonald's to relate. And I know that's hard to believe, that there would be people who thought that was what was going on, but you've got to understand for some of these people, it is a real true mental disability. And I don't mean that in an assaulting way, but there mentally is the inability to understand and recognize such simple and basic things. And so for normal people, they saw this for what it was. It was a fun deal. Some of it was to troll Kamala Harris because she claimed she worked at McDonald's. And it was a fun little thing to do. People in media do this sort of thing all the time. Their promotions where, I was in Phantom of the Opera in a couple of scenes. Yes, I technically wasn't in Phantom of the Opera as some sort of official cast member, but they did a little promotional thing when Phantom of the Opera came through and was at Juanita Kay, and I had a walk-on in, I think, 2 different scenes where, no dialogue or anything. It was just sort of an extra in the background. These are things to draw attention to certain events, and that's what this was. But this whole just insane disconnect from reality of believing that the point here was to convince people that Trump actually worked at McDonald's. Understanding that, I think, helps us understand how it is that some of these people that they are just so detached and delusional from what goes on in this world and in this country, that's what they actually believed. And I think that they actually did believe that. Coming up here, I want to play audio of the woman who immigrated from Brazil 26 years ago. And she, just talked about what it was like to pull up to the window and see that it was Trump. But also, she was asked what she meant or what was behind her request to Trump to not let America turn into her native Brazil. She explains that as well. I'm Nick Reed. Someone noted, well, it's obvious that Trump didn't actually work at McDonald's, just like it's obvious that, Waltz didn't actually serve in combat. He didn't. I thought, yeah,
Yeah, it's a
that's a
great
really good
point.
point.
Yeah.
That he actually wasn't a higher rank than he said he was. That he actually didn't have his daughter conceived through IVF. That he actually did, all of these different things. The woman who was from Brazil originally and came through the drive-through at the McDonald's there had an interview after that with Martha McCallum on Fox News, and she was asked, among other things, just what was that like when you pull up and you see the president there?
It was like meeting a friend. He looked us in the eye. The way he communicated with us, the way he greeted my children on the back seat, it was incredible. My kids were. I cannot just believe that I shook Donald Trump's hand. I'm not going to wash my hands for the next few days. So he just communicated with them. His looks and the way he shook our hands, like it was very genuine. He's a genuine man.
And this is one of the other things that the left hates about him, and I think, frankly, why it is that so many high-level elected officials, politicians, don't understand him. And that's not just Democrats, but even some Republicans, because they're not authentic. Their entire lives, there was a conversation, I think I may have audio of it. Victor David Hansen was on, and he was talking about why this was so well received, and I think he was on with Ingram. And he says the thing about Trump, he's just authentic and he's genuine. And he noted, Kamala Harris, she was raised by a couple Berkeley PhD individuals and then went straight into politics. And that's not unusual. A lot of people who end up in D.C., high rank, that they've never known the sort of life that the average American owns. It doesn't mean that they're better. It doesn't mean that they're worse. It's just different life experiences. And Trump, on the other hand, people can say what they want. Well, he got $1 million loan from his daddy. The fact of the matter is, in order for Trump to be successful in the way he has been, he has to have known what it's like, what it is that the concrete layers go through. He's there on site with these projects whenever problems arise, and so he knows those people. They've been part of his life growing up. And so he's comfortable around everyone. He is one of the few people in existence that is just as comfortable around somebody working at McDonald's as he is around the president of France. And that's just because his entire life has been one of an individual who has been exposed to and worked around every single walk of life. And that just benefits him in a way that people who have been career politicians or grown up in an atmosphere of elites, it's like learning a language. When you're very young, you can learn languages very easily and you can adopt the accents. But as you become older, at some point, your brain, that development part of the brain, is no longer working in the way that it was. And so it becomes much, much harder to learn things, and you're never going to be able to learn it like you did as a young person. And, Donald Trump benefited from those formative years in his entire life being submerged in cultures of people all the way from lower class to blue-collar working class to the elites throughout the world. And so he's able to be comfortable in any of these settings. And that's just something that the vast, vast, vast majority of successful, high-ranking elected officials don't have. And that, again, Democrat and Republican. And it's also part of the reason they just don't get it. They don't understand when you have average people, they're like, oh my, that's the thing that strikes them about meeting him. He just seems so normal. I mean, he wasn't showy. He was just, it was like meeting somebody that was totally normal, or it was somebody that I've known my whole life, and that cannot be duplicated. And it's one of the great frustrations that people have in this seething hatred, that benefit that he has in that connection with people. Coming up, I'm going to play for her explanation as to what it was that was behind her request to Trump to not let America turn into her native country of Brazil.
Springfield's Talk 1041, your first alert forecast from Color 10 Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by Wolfpack Cleaners, your residential and commercial cleaning professionals. Today we'll see sunny skies with a high near 85. Tonight, clear with a low around 56. For your Wednesday, sunny with a high near 80. And on Thursday, sunny skies with a high near 82.
The woman who was one of the voters going through the drive-through meeting with Donald Trump was from Brazil, and she talked about how afterwards she was doing an interview with Martha McCallum that he was just so genuine. It was like just seeing a friend, and he was just so nice. One of the things I've noticed about people who meet Donald Trump is they note that, and I find this to be interesting and telling, aside from that, he just seemed normal. He was just this person that you're meeting that was interested in meeting you. But if they have kids, how just like the children he talks to and treats them as if they are adults as well, essentially, that oftentimes, particularly with important people, unless it's for a photo op and, kissing the baby, the children are not really that relevant. But he just talks to you. You wouldn't know the difference between him saying hello to and meeting young people versus their parents. And I suspect that his treatment of children in a manner that is adult-like is probably one of the reasons that his children have grown up so well. I think that whenever children are treated in a manner that is not dumbing them down, then you end up with children that are a bit ahead of the curve. And so I suspect that interaction he has with kids is part of the reason that his kids have grown up so successful. But the woman from Brazil, she made a comment regarding her native country of Brazil and asking Trump not to let it become like Brazil, that being the United States. And she was asked about that comment.
I moved here about 26 years ago, and my parents were victims of the Brazilian corruption, government corruption. My mom lost her business, a pretty successful business, and she lost 20-something, almost 30 years ago. And that is the reason why we moved to the United States. I am very grateful for this country. I love this country, and I don't want to see this country become the corrupt sewage that Brazil is at this moment, where politicians do whatever they want with no accountability to the people.
And boy, if COVID didn't show that, talking about businesses being shut down, no accountability, no apologies, destroying people's lives. And it would be one thing if, and this is where the corruption element comes in, if those politicians who pushed for those lives to be destroyed abided by their own rules, but time after time after time after time, and it was always Democrats, would get caught unmasked, out in public, at hair salons, getting jewelry from jewelry stores, these numerous instances all across the country in which they were caught doing things that they threatened to jail average citizens for doing. For the past couple of presidential cycles, we have heard from people, whether they're people, and we've had them on as author of the week before, particularly one woman who escaped Mao's China. We hear from people, Cuba, Venezuela, and they all are saying what is in line with what this woman was saying from Brazil, and that is that we are in danger of continuing to turn into a very, very bad place. And they're always sounding that warning siren in regards to Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton and now Kamala Harris. People love to talk about listening to the, quote, experts, and we have unfortunately redefined what constitutes an expert, but I would regard an expert as someone who actually has experiences, real-life experiences in the arena in which they're speaking. And if you take the time to listen to people from horrifically corrupt dictatorships or horrifically corrupt, governments in which they fled and came here to the United States, they all sing the same song. And that is this big government approach that the Democrats are taking us is a very, very dangerous path. And they plead with people, like in this case, like Donald Trump, please help us stop this. I would suggest we would all be much better off as a country if we listen to people who have been in these situations. It doesn't mean we have to rubber stamp the recommendations from people who have lived under corrupt regimes and socialist and fascist and communist and dictators. But when they're all telling us the exact same thing, it might be wise to listen. Springfield's Talk 1041, I'm Nick Reed. Soon wrapping up camping season, recreational vehicle season, and for a lot of folks, this is a great time to get yourself into a new RV, take advantage of the end of the year deals. Wilder RV, Clinton, Missouri, on 13 just north of Springfield, just over an hour. Or maybe get into an RV for the first time. Great time of year to do it, and also a great time of year if you already have that RV to take care of any repairs. That way you don't have to stand in line for it as we eventually get into the next year, and everyone getting out their RVs like, oh yeah, we had that water leak, or those steps were a little rusted, needed to be replaced, or a water line is leaking, something along those lines, and you got to wait to get it fixed. Take care of that now so that when the new season comes about and you get her out, she is ready to go. All of those services provided by Wilder RV, Clinton, Missouri. You can find them at wilderrv.com. I wanted to play a couple bits of audio because I thought that it was very well put regarding what it is about Trump that cannot be duplicated. And Victor David Hanson was on with Laura Ingraham talking about this. And a lot of it revolves around authenticity. And we hear so much about authenticity because it connects with people. And what the great thing about authenticity is you can't fake it. Now, the downside of that is you can't fake it. And if somebody has it and you don't, and you're competing for something, there's really nothing you can do about it. You have to just write it off and recognize that's not a battle I can win. I got to try on other fronts. The problem is people try it. And what also is just so fun about authenticity, the more you try it when you're not being authentic, the worse it becomes. They're like Chinese handcuffs. The more you try to make it happen, the less of it happening happens. Here's Victor David Hanson on Trump being authentic.
Well, it's authenticity. It's his issues, his agenda. They stay consistent. He didn't change them. They're the same thing: secure border, predictable deterrence abroad, fight crime, promote fossil fuels. It's consistent, and everybody knows it's consistent. It's aimed at a middle class. And then there's the person Trump. He wears the same type of clothes, whether he's in the inner city or whether he's out on the campaign trail or he's up in Trump Tower. He has the same Bronx accent. He doesn't have a Jamaican accent, a black accent, Hispanic accent, depending on the crowd he's addressing, like Kamala Harris.
Well, and how true is that? And that is true. If you were to take Trump interaction and you were able to take out the visuals of the person with whom he is interacting, and you wouldn't know. Is he talking to a world leader, or is he talking to the bodega owner? Is he talking to a CEO, or is he talking to some people of color at a barbershop? He treats everyone because that he is who he is. He doesn't change it based on the audience, which drives a lot of people nuts. Well, I can't believe he would say this to those people. He treats them the same. This is also the irony of people who claim that they're all about treating men and women equal. The fact that he treats women and talks to women and about women the same way he does men drives him nuts. But he interacts with everyone the same, as opposed to so many Democrats in particular, but Kamala Harris, the different accents everywhere she goes. I mean, it's just, they are so polar opposite of one another. He also makes an observation that I think it's important because it's difficult for people to, the left in particular, they equate Trump's success and wealth to his status, because that's how they are. So, in other words, they don't think it's possible for someone who is rich to relate to people who are not. And that's because they don't. See, they see class and wealth as being the same, but Donald Trump does not. In other words, you don't have to be elite just because you have a lot of money. Elite is a mindset. Elite is a perspective. Now, very often the two go hand in hand, but they don't have to depending on the person. And so it is and you even would hear it on the campaign trail from the Harris and Walz campaign, trying to convince people that Trump doesn't understand you because he was rich. Because he's rich. That means he can't understand you. But that isn't necessarily true, and that is the point that Victor Davis Hanson made with Laura Ingraham last night.
Well, that's because she's been in government and among the elites her entire life. She's the child of 2 PhDs, and she just went straight into the political world and has never come out of it. He's a builder, so he has to know what cement workers do, what electricians do, what plumbers do, and he likes the people because they build his things, and he feels one with them, and they understand that. And they like him. And he doesn't, from his entire career, whether it was boxing or wrestling or kind of dubious people that other people would shun, he didn't. He always judged things on the merits. And he wasn't ashamed to say, you know what, I know this guy, I like him, or I'm a friend of this guy. But other people were, they would locate people by their class, their credentials, their degrees. He was never part of that elite.
And this is something that the elite don't get. And Democrats don't have a monopoly on this. They embrace it. I mean, it is who they are. But there are many Republicans. You can oftentimes identify them as people who are never Trumpers because they don't understand that. They can't comprehend that Trump is relatable to average people because he's rich. That means he can't be average and understand the average person, but he does. And this is the great frustration they have, is they try to convince people who find Trump relatable because of the reasons that Victor Davis Hanson noted there. And they keep telling us over and over again, Trump doesn't understand you, Trump, but you just know. There are certain things about human nature that are instinctual. And oftentimes impressions about people are one of those things. And a lot of it's body language. A lot of it, again, with Trump, it's just how comfortable he is around every average person. He doesn't seem fake. I mean, you look at that versus Kamala Harris walking into a convenience store. All right, everyone, where are the Doritos? You can just tell it's fake. Trump tossing out chicken fingers to people at a game, and it just seems natural because it is for him, because he does understand us. And that's something that the left and some on the right who are elite can't figure out because they don't think it is possible for someone who's rich to not be elite. But it does occur, and Donald Trump's an example of that. Did you see that Kamala did a town hall with Maria Shriver? Did you see
No,
this?
I did not see this.
Someone asked, I guess this was at the beginning, or it may have even been before it was airing, but there is footage of it. Someone from the audience asked Maria Shriver, now, so town halls originally, they were intended, you got elected officials show up, and then people, they weren't initially intended for the politician to share information with the town hall. It was so the elected official could show up and have the town, the community say, hey, this is what's going on here. This is what we want you to do. So it was that feedback. That's the way that the information was intended to flow. It was the ability before, well before internet and mass forms of communication, for an elected official to get as best as possible a sense of what the community at large was thinking and feeling and what they wanted of their elected official. So clearly, communication with an audience at a town hall is ultimately the original purpose of having a town hall. So someone had asked before it began, asked Maria Shriver, now we're going to be able to ask questions, right?
You're not, unfortunately. We have some predetermined questions, and hopefully I'll be able to ask some of the questions that might be in your head. I hope so.
It's like, no, that's not what this is. So two things now. At Kamala Harris events, there's no place for Jesus. That's elsewhere. And there's no place for questions from voting citizens, okay? So now that we've gotten that out of the way, I mean, can it be?
And that was supposed to be a town hall?
Yeah, it was a town hall event. I think it was Maria Shriver. I didn't actually.
I mean, isn't that the type of event where you are allowed?
Well, that's the whole point.
Exactly. Aren't you supposed to be allowed to ask questions? Any question?
Well, she hoped that she would ask a question that was already in their head. It reminds me of when I was on CHR, Top 40 Radio, and we had a very set playlist. And when people would call in and request a song, we'd say, oh, yeah, we'll see if we can get that on for you. And it was all based off the idea that whatever song they're requesting, most likely we're going to be playing anyway. That's sort of her response there. Like, well, hopefully we'll just, whatever question you're thinking of, it's like a psychic thing, whatever you're thinking of, that's the question that we will ask her. But, I mean, this, I know I just keep hammering away at this, but every single day brings into focus the complete difference in even philosophical understanding of the relationship between an elected official and the people. Trump walked into a barber shop, which was mostly men of color, one of which he would acknowledge that he's voted Democrat his entire life. This was in New York. And sat down and was just talking with them, and he was taking questions, versus here Kamala Harris at town hall with the elites up on stage and an audience member. Now we're going to get to ask questions. Well, no, that's not really what this is. We're not. We already have predetermined questions. And gee, who do you think determined the questions? It is not a race between Republicans and Democrats. It is a race between the elites, who do not feel that there is any accountability to you, versus the rest of us. Glenn Beck is coming up next. I will talk with you tomorrow. I'm Nick Reed.